She returned to her grandmother's locked barn after 30 years. What she found made her fall to her knees. This is the story of how an inheritance isn't always about money, and how the places we run from are sometimes the only homes we have left. If you've ever felt lost and wondered if there was a place for you in this world, the air in the group home always smelled the same. A flat, sterile mix of industrial cleaner and the faint, lingering scent of microwaved chili. For 10 years, that was the smell of my life. On the morning of my 18th birthday, the day I officially aged out of the system, I stood in the middle of my small, beige room with a single cardboard box at my feet. It wasn't much of a box. Inside were 3 changes of clothes, a worn copy of a book I'd read 100 times, and a faded photograph of a woman I didn't know, a woman they told me was my mother. The social worker, a woman named Carol, who had the permanently tired eyes of someone who'd seen too many stories like mine, handed me a thick manila envelope. "This is it, Ilara. Your final paperwork, your birth certificate, and your last check. There's also a letter. It came for you yesterday, from a law firm." She said it with the same detached sympathy she used for everything. It wasn't unkind, just worn down, like an old shoe. I took the envelope. It felt heavier than it should have, heavier than my entire life packed into that one sad little box. I didn't open it right away. I wanted to wait until I was outside, away from the smell of chili and bleach, away from the silent judgment of walls that had seen 100 girls just like me come and go. I walked out the front door without looking back. There were no goodbyes to say. The other girls were strangers bound to me by circumstance, not friendship. We were all just waiting for our turn to be pushed out into the world, ready or not. I found a bench at a bus stop 2 blocks away, the city groaning around me with the sound of traffic and distant sirens. The air was cold, biting at my exposed skin, but it was real. It was free. I opened the manila envelope and pulled out the letter. The paper was thick, creamy, with an embossed letterhead. Henderson and Associates, Attorneys at Law. My hands trembled slightly as I read. It was a formal, stilted notification. I, Ilara Vance, was the sole heir to the estate of one Evelyn Vance, my grandmother. The property, it stated, was located in a place called Sparrow Creek, a town I'd never heard of. It consisted of a small farmhouse, a barn, and 5 acres of land. There was a catch, of course. There's always a catch. The property came with 30 years of delinquent taxes, a sum so large it made my stomach clench. It was an impossible number, a debt from a life I never lived. But then came the second paragraph, the one that changed everything. A development corporation, Northgate Holdings, had made a standing offer to purchase the land, an offer that would more than cover the back taxes and leave me with what the letter described as a substantial sum. Enough to start over, enough to be someone. All I had to do was sign. The lawyer, a Mr. Henderson, requested I contact him at my earliest convenience to discuss the matter. He'd included a bus ticket to Sparrow Creek and a key taped to a piece of cardstock. A single, old-fashioned skeleton key, its metal worn smooth with time. I stared at that key for a long time. The system had prepared me for nothing. It taught me how to fill out forms, how to be quiet, how to expect disappointment. It had never taught me how to own something. It had never taught me what to do with a key to a place I didn't know, from a family I couldn't remember. The bus ticket was for the next morning. I had less than 24 hours to decide whether to run towards this ghost of a past, or take the money and run away. But run where? I had nowhere to go. That single, cold key in my palm was the only thing in the world that pointed in any direction at all. So I decided to go. I decided to see the place that was mine, even if only for a day. The phone call to Mr. Henderson was as awkward and sterile as I expected. His voice was dry, like rustling paper, and he spoke in carefully measured sentences. He confirmed the details from the letter, his tone suggesting this was a simple, transactional matter. "Miss Vance," he said, "I understand this is a lot to take in. The Northgate offer is generous. It's clean. You sign the papers, the debt is cleared, and you walk away with a significant nest egg. Given your circumstances." He trailed off, but I knew what he meant. Given that I was an 18-year-old orphan, with a cardboard box and a bus station bench for a waiting room, this was a lifeline. It was the smart choice, the only choice. Why was it left to me now? I asked, my voice small. Why not before? There was a slight pause on his end. Your grandmother's will was specific. The property was to be held in trust until your 18th birthday. She stipulated that you, and only you, could decide its fate. He didn't offer any more information, and I didn't know how to ask. How do you ask a stranger about the grandmother who abandoned you? How do you ask why she left you a debt and a difficult choice instead of a home? He gave me instructions on where to pick up the bus, told me the caretaker's cottage on the property had been aired out for my arrival, and ended the call with a brisk, "I'll await your decision." He was an instrument of the system, just a different kind. Instead of social workers, it was lawyers. Instead of case files, it was wills and deeds. It was all the same impersonal machinery. That night, I slept on a cot in a shelter, the sounds of coughing and quiet weeping a familiar lullaby. I held the key in my fist, its sharp edges digging into my palm. It felt like an anchor, the only real thing in a world of temporary spaces and transient people. The bus ride the next day was a journey through a world I'd only ever seen in pictures. The gray, concrete sprawl of the city slowly gave way to patchy suburbs, then to wide, open fields stitched together with dark lines of trees. The sky grew bigger, the clouds wider. For hours, I just watched the landscape roll by, my reflection a ghostly presence in the window. I saw cows grazing, old barns tilting against the wind, and houses with smoke curling from their chimneys. It all felt like a foreign country. My world had been pavement, brick, and chain-link fences. This world was soil, wood, and endless sky. The other passengers were few and far between, mostly older people with weathered faces and quiet eyes. No one paid me any mind. I was just another anonymous traveler on a slow bus to nowhere. The further we went, the more the knot of anxiety in my stomach began to loosen, replaced by a strange, hollow curiosity. What would I find there? A ruin? A memory? Or just an empty plot of land and a final, disappointing answer to a question I was too afraid to ask? The bus finally hissed to a stop in what could barely be called a town. Sparrow Creek was a single main street with a handful of storefronts. A general store with a dusty window display, a post office, a diner with a flickering neon sign, and not much else. It was the kind of place people passed through, not a place they stopped. Mr. Henderson's instructions led me down a gravel road that branched off the main street. The air here was different. It smelled of damp earth, pine needles, and rain. The silence was so profound, it felt loud, broken only by the cawing of a distant crow and the crunch of my own footsteps. After a 20-minute walk, I saw it. A rusted mailbox half swallowed by overgrown bushes, the name Vance barely visible beneath a layer of grime and faded paint. Beyond it, a long, unkempt driveway led to a small white farmhouse. The house was in a state of quiet decay. The paint was peeling in long strips, the porch sagged on one side like a tired old man, and the windows were dark and vacant. But it was still standing. It was real. And next to it, set back a little further, was the barn. It was huge, far bigger than the house, its wood weathered to a silvery gray. The great double doors were shut fast, a heavy, rusted chain and padlock holding them closed. This was it. This was my inheritance. A forgotten house, a locked barn, and 5 acres of weeds. I walked up the 3 creaking steps to the front porch and slid the key Mr. Henderson had given me into the lock of the front door. It turned with a painful, grinding sound. The door swung inward, releasing a sigh of stale, musty air. I stepped across the threshold, from the world I knew into the one that had been waiting for me for 30 years. The inside of the house was a time capsule. A thick layer of dust coated every surface, turning the familiar shapes of furniture into pale, ghostly mounds. Sunlight struggled through the grimy window panes, cutting dusty golden shafts through the gloom. In the living room, a sofa and two armchairs were draped in white sheets, their forms slumped in silent patience. A stone fireplace stood cold and empty against one wall, a stack of brittle, yellowed newspapers beside it. I ran a finger along the wooden mantelpiece, leaving a clean streak in the thick dust. My fingertip came away black. It felt like I was trespassing in someone else's memory. The air was heavy with the scent of old wood, decaying paper, and something else. Something faintly floral, like dried lavender. I moved through the small downstairs rooms like a ghost myself. The kitchen was modest, with a porcelain sink and simple wooden cabinets. Inside one, I found a single chipped mug and a small stack of plates, each one carefully wrapped in newspaper. It was as if someone had been preparing to leave, or perhaps preparing for someone to arrive, and had simply stopped midway through. There was a strange sense of order beneath the chaos of neglect. Nothing was broken or overturned. It was just paused. Upstairs, there were two small bedrooms. One was empty except for a bare iron bed frame. The other, presumably my grandmother's, held a simple wooden bed, a dresser, and a small writing desk by the window. On the desk sat an old rotary dial telephone and a calendar, still turned to a page from 30 years ago. I felt a pang of something sharp and unfamiliar in my chest. Grief? Longing? I didn't know this woman, Evelyn Vance. To me, she was just a name on a legal document, the source of my problems and my potential salvation. Yet standing in her silent, empty room, I felt a connection to her, a whisper of a life lived within these walls. I spent the rest of the afternoon just exploring, touching things, trying to piece together a story from the objects left behind. I found a box of old photographs in a closet, most of them faded black and white images of people I didn't recognize. But near the bottom, I found one in color. It was a picture of a young woman with kind eyes and a warm smile, holding a baby wrapped in a yellow blanket. The woman had my nose. The baby had to be me. I stared at the photograph until my eyes blurred. It was the first picture I had ever seen of myself as an infant, the first piece of evidence that I had once been held, once been loved. I carefully tucked it into my pocket, the smooth paper a warm weight against my leg. My attention kept returning to the barn. It loomed outside the window, silent and imposing. The front door key hadn't worked on its massive padlock. It was a separate place, a separate secret. Why was it locked so securely when the house was left open to time? I searched the house for another key. I looked in the kitchen drawers, on hooks by the door, in the small box of trinkets on the dresser. Nothing. I felt a growing obsession with it. Whatever answers this place held, I was certain they were in that barn. Defeated, I sat on the dusty living room sofa, the sheet crinkling beneath me. Where would an old woman hide a key? A key to the most important place on her property. I closed my eyes and tried to imagine her. Evelyn Vance. A woman who loved lavender, who wrapped her plates in newspaper, who kept a photograph of her grandchild. She wasn't just a legal abstraction, she was a person. Where would a person like that hide something precious? Not somewhere clever, not somewhere complicated, somewhere meaningful. My mind drifted back to a vague, hazy image, a ghost of a memory so faint I wasn't sure if it was real or just a dream. A little girl, me, sitting on a porch swing. A woman, her face unclear, humming a tune and pointing to a loose stone in the fireplace hearth. "That's our secret spot," a voice echoed in my head. It was so faint it was barely there. Was it real? I stood up, my heart starting to beat a little faster. I walked over to the cold fireplace and knelt on the dusty floor. I ran my hands over the stones of the hearth, feeling for anything loose. And then I found it. One stone, near the bottom, shifted slightly under my touch. My breath caught in my throat. I wiggled it back and forth, my fingers raw, until it came free. And there, nestled in the dark cavity behind it, was another key. It was larger than the house key, made of heavy, dark iron, and shaped like a clover at its head. It was the key to the barn. Holding the heavy iron key felt different. This wasn't a key from a lawyer, this was a key from her. It felt personal, a message sent across time. I walked out of the house and across the overgrown yard towards the barn. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows, and the air had grown cooler. The silence here was deeper, older. The barn doors were massive, made of thick, weathered planks of wood held together by iron straps. The chain was thick and rusted, but the padlock it held was a newer, more formidable model. It looked out of place. I slid the iron key into the lock. For a moment it stuck, and my heart sank. I jiggled it gently, pushed a little harder, and then, with a loud, satisfying clunk, the mechanism turned. The shackle sprang open. I pulled the heavy chain free, its links clattering against the wood. The doors were swollen shut with years of damp and disuse. I had to put my shoulder into it, pushing with all my weight until, with a deep groan of protesting wood, one of the doors scraped open just enough for me to slip through. I stepped inside, and the world changed. The air in here was cool and still, and it smelled not of decay, but of dry hay, cedar wood, and engine oil. Sunlight streamed in through the gaps in the wall planks, creating stripes of light and shadow that danced in the dust motes I had disturbed. I expected to find old, rusted farm equipment, piles of junk, the debris of a forgotten life. But it wasn't like that at all. The barn was meticulously organized. On one side, tools hung neatly on a pegboard wall, their metal surfaces clean and free of rust. On the other, shelves were lined with neatly labeled jars of what looked like preserves, their contents long since turned dark and unrecognizable. In the center of the vast space, covered by a heavy canvas tarp, was the distinct shape of a vehicle. I walked over and lifted a corner of the tarp. Beneath it was an old pickup truck, a beautiful vintage model from the 50s, its paint a dusty but still vibrant sky blue. The chrome was pitted, but it was all there. It was a museum piece, a perfectly preserved relic. This wasn't a place of abandonment. This was a place of preservation. It was a sanctuary. And then I saw it, tucked away in the far corner, almost hidden in the shadows. A large, dark wooden chest. It was an old steamer trunk, bound with leather and brass. It wasn't dusty like everything else. It looked like it had been wiped clean recently. A cold feeling washed over me. Had someone else been here? The thought was terrifying. I was supposed to be alone. I approached the chest cautiously. There was no lock on it, just two heavy brass latches. My hands were shaking as I reached down and flipped them open. They made a soft clicking sound in the immense silence of the barn. I lifted the heavy lid. I don't know what I was expecting to find. Money? Valuables? Something I could sell to pay the taxes. But it was none of those things. The chest was filled, almost to the brim, with letters. Dozens and dozens of bundles of letters, each one tied neatly with a different color of ribbon. On top of the first bundle was a single, untied envelope with my name, Ilara, written on it in elegant, looping cursive. I sank to my knees on the barn's dusty floorboards. The sheer volume of them was overwhelming. This was a life's work. This was a story. This was everything. My fingers trembled as I picked up the envelope with my name on it. The paper felt thick and soft, like it was made of cloth. I broke the wax seal, a simple impression of a wildflower, and unfolded the single sheet of paper inside. The letter began. "My dearest Alara," it read, "if you are reading this, then I am gone, and you have come home. I hope you have. I have prayed for it every day for 30 years. The world outside the barn faded away. There was only the dusty shaft of light, the scent of old wood, and the voice of my grandmother rising from the page. My dearest Alara," the letter continued, "I know you must have so many questions. I know you must feel abandoned, angry, and alone. I don't blame you. The story you were told, the story the state has in its files, is a lie. It's a lie I created to save your life. There isn't an easy way to say this, so I will just say it plain. Your parents were good people, but they fell in with a bad crowd. Your father, my son, made a promise he couldn't keep to men who didn't accept apologies. It started small, a loan to fix the truck, but it grew into something dark and suffocating, a debt that owned him, that owned them both. I had to stop reading for a moment. I closed my eyes, my head spinning. My whole life I'd been told a simple, cruel story. My parents were addicts who didn't want me. It was a clean, sharp wound. This story, this new story, was something else entirely. It was messy, complicated, and 100 times more painful. I took a deep breath and continued reading. They weren't bad people, Ilara. They were just young and scared. When you were born, they tried to get out, to build a life for you here, on this land. This farm was meant to be your sanctuary. But the people they owed money to didn't let go. They came here. They made threats. They wanted this land as payment. I refused. Your father refused. One night, they came to the house. There was a terrible fight. Your father, he stood up to them to protect you and your mother. He paid the ultimate price for it. And your mother, in her grief and her terror, she ran. I never saw her again. I don't know if she is alive or dead. I let out a sound, a choked sob that was torn from somewhere deep inside me. I fell forward, my hands flat against the rough floorboards, the letter crumpled in my fist. I cried. I cried for the father I never knew, who died protecting me. I cried for the mother who ran, lost to grief and fear. I cried for the grandmother who had to live with that nightmare. And I cried for the little girl who grew up believing she was worthless, thrown away, when the truth was that she had been the treasure they were all trying to protect. It was a storm of grief, 30 years of it, unleashed in the silent, dusty barn. When the tears finally subsided, I was exhausted, hollowed out. I picked up the letter again, my hands steady now. There was more. I was left with you, a tiny, perfect baby, and a threat that was very, very real. The men who did this, they were part of a powerful local family. The law couldn't touch them then. They wanted this land, and they would have hurt you to get it. So I made the hardest decision of my life. I gave you up. I took you to the city and left you at a hospital, with a note saying I couldn't care for you. I invented the story of addiction and abandonment because it was the only way to make the state take you far away, to hide you where they could never find you. I had to become a monster in your story so that you could have a life at all. I cut off all contact. I let this place fall into ruin on the outside so no one would think it was worth anything. I became a recluse. It was the only way to keep you safe. Underneath that first letter were the bundles. Each was a collection of letters, one for every year of my life. Ilara, year 1. Ilara, year 2. All the way up to Ilara, year 18. She had written to me every year, telling me about the farm, about the seasons, about her memories of my parents. She had poured her entire heart, her entire life into these letters, sealing them away in this chest, a testament of a love that had to be silent to be true. I opened the bundle for my 5th year, the year I entered the foster system for good. "Today you turned 5, she wrote. "I wonder if you have my eyes. I wonder if you are happy." I went to the general store and bought a small cake. I ate a piece for you. The man who runs the store, old Mr. Gable, he asked why I was celebrating. I told him it was just a day. It felt like a betrayal to keep you a secret, but a necessary one. "I hope one day you'll understand. I hope one day you'll forgive me." The weight of her sacrifice, the sheer loneliness of it, was crushing. 30 years of isolation, of pretending, of living like a ghost on her own land, all for me. And now I understood the lock on the barn. The barn was her heart. It was the one place she kept the truth alive, where she tended to the memory of her family, where she kept the truck ready, perhaps hoping one day she could come and get me. It was the only part of her world she didn't let die. And listen, if you've made it this far into my story, it's probably because some part of it is hitting home for you. Maybe you've also had to deal with a family secret, or felt like you were carrying the weight of a past you didn't understand. This journey is about discovering that we are more than the stories we're told about ourselves. If that's something you believe in, if you believe in second chances and finding the truth, no matter how hard it is, then we're not alone in these struggles. It means the world to me. Now, let's get back to the barn. I spent the entire night in there, reading. I sat with my back against the old blue truck and read letter after letter, year after year. I lived my life through her eyes. I learned about my first steps, which I took right here on this barn floor. I learned about my father's laugh, how it used to make the windows rattle. I learned about my mother's love for painting wildflowers. She filled in the 30 empty years of my life with stories, with love, with a history I never knew I had. In the bundle for my 16th year, she wrote about the developers. "A company called Northgate Holdings has started buying up all the land around here," she wrote. "They are persistent. They send letters every month. They offer more and more money. I recognize the name on their letterhead. It's the son of one of the men who came here that night. They've gone legitimate now, hiding behind corporate logos and legal papers, but it's them. They are still trying to take this land. They are trying to bury what they did here under a golf course or a row of vacation homes. I will never sell. This land is your birthright, Ilara. It was paid for in blood and sacrifice. It is the only thing I have left to give you." It all clicked into place. The persistent offer. Mr. Henderson's detached advice to just take the money and run. They weren't just buying land. They were trying to erase a crime. They were trying to silence the last witness, the land itself. By the time the sun began to rise, casting pale pink light through the cracks in the barn walls, I had finished the last letter, the one for my 18th birthday. "Today you are a woman," it read. "The trust ends. The choice is now yours. I have left you with a terrible burden, I know. A debt, a broken down farm, and a powerful enemy. I have also left you the truth. In this chest, you will find some money I saved over the years. It's not much, but it should be enough to pay the most pressing taxes and give you a little breathing room. Enough to hold them off for a while. You can sell, I would understand. You could take the money and build a new life, free from all of this. There would be no shame in that. It is what I have always wanted for you, to be safe and free. But there is another choice. You can stay. You can fight. You can make this place your home, the home your parents wanted for you. You can let this land be a memory, not a secret. The choice is yours, my brave girl. Whatever you decide, know that I have loved you every second of every day. Your loving grandmother, Evelyn." My whole body ached. I was emotionally and physically exhausted. But for the first time in my life, I felt a sense of clarity, a sense of purpose. I was not Ilara Vance, ward of the state. I was Ilara Vance, granddaughter of Evelyn Vance. I was the keeper of a promise. My phone buzzed in my pocket, making me jump. The screen lit up with an unknown number. I answered it, my voice hoarse. "Miss Vance? This is Arthur Henderson." His voice was the same, dry and professional. "I trust you've had a chance to look over the property. Northgate Holdings has authorized me to present you with their final offer. They've increased it by 30%. It's a life-changing amount of money, Miss Vance. They need an answer by the end of the day." I looked around the barn. I saw the neatly hung tools, the old blue truck, the empty chest that had given me back my life. This place wasn't a burden. It was a gift. It was a home. "No," I said. My voice was quiet, but it didn't tremble. "The answer is no." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I see," Mr. Henderson said, and for the first time I heard a flicker of something other than professional detachment in his voice. "Surprise? Respect? Are you certain? This is a very generous—" "I'm certain," I interrupted. "The property is not for sale. It will never be for sale." "Very well," he said, his tone shifting. "I will inform them. I must advise you, they will likely make things difficult for you regarding the tax situation." "I know," I said. "I'll handle it." I ended the call. I stood up, stretching my stiff limbs. The sun was fully up now, and the barn was filled with a warm, golden light. I walked over to the massive doors and pushed them all the way open, letting the fresh morning air rush in. I had a home, and I was ready to fight for it. The first step was the money. Tucked in a false bottom of the wooden chest, just as Evelyn's last letter had promised, was a metal box. Inside were stacks of cash, old bills bound with rubber bands, smelling faintly of cedar and mothballs. I counted it. It was a little over $10,000. Not a fortune, but it was the fortune my grandmother had scraped together over 30 years of solitude. It was the most beautiful money I had ever seen. I knew I couldn't just walk into the county tax office with a box of cash. I needed a bank account, a plan. I needed help. I called Mr. Henderson back. "It's Alara Vance," I said, my voice firmer this time. "I need to know the exact amount of the most immediate tax payment required to prevent foreclosure proceedings." He seemed taken aback by my call. "Miss Vance, as I said, Northgate will not make this easy. They have influence." "I don't care about their influence," I said, the words feeling true as I spoke them. "I am my grandmother's heir, and I am keeping my property. Are you my lawyer, Mr. Henderson, or are you theirs?" The silence on the line was thick with unspoken things. I could almost hear the gears turning in his head, reevaluating the file he had for me. The one that probably had "foster kid," "disadvantaged," and "easy target" written all over it. "I am your lawyer, Miss Vance," he finally said, and his voice had changed. The dryness was gone, replaced by a grudging respect. "My fiduciary duty is to you. I will get you the exact figures and the procedure for payment. And I will also begin looking into the history of Northgate's acquisitions in the area. Your grandmother's letters, if they allege what I think they allege, they may be more than just a family history. They may be evidence." A spark of fierce, protective fire ignited in my chest. He was right. These letters weren't just for me. They were her testimony. While I waited for his call back, I started to work. I couldn't tackle the whole house at once, so I started with the porch. I found a stiff bristled broom in the barn and began to sweep away the 30 years of dirt, leaves, and cobwebs. It was hard physical work. My muscles, unaccustomed to labor, screamed in protest. But with every stroke of the broom, I felt like I was clearing away more than just dirt. I was sweeping away the neglect. I was sweeping away the sadness. I was making a space for myself. As I worked, a beat-up old farm truck, even older than the one in my barn, rattled up the driveway and stopped. An old man with a face like a road map and clear, sharp blue eyes got out. He leaned against the truck and watched me for a moment. "You must be Evelyn's girl," he said. It wasn't a question. I stopped sweeping. "I'm her granddaughter, Elara." He nodded slowly. "Name's George Gable. My father used to run the general store. I run it now. Knew your grandmother my whole life. Stubborn as a mule, that one. Good woman." He looked at the house, then at the barn, then back at me. "Heard you told the Northgate vultures to shove off. That took guts. They don't like being told no." "It's my home," I said simply. George spat on the ground. "Damn right it is. Evelyn kept this place for you. Fought for it. She'd be proud." He paused, then jerked his head towards the back of his truck. "Got a mower in the back. Yard's a mess. Figured you could use a hand." I was so stunned by the simple offer of help that I couldn't speak for a moment. In my entire life, no one had ever offered me help without a form to sign or a box to check. It was just kindness. I can't pay you," I stammered. He laughed, a rough, barking sound. "Don't want your money. Consider it a welcome to the neighborhood. Besides, I'd like to see the look on those Northgate lawyers' faces when they drive by and see this place starting to look like a home again." For the rest of the day, we worked. He showed me how to start the ancient riding mower, and I tackled the sea of weeds that was the front lawn, while he used a chainsaw to cut back the overgrown bushes that were threatening to swallow the house whole. We didn't talk much, but the shared work was a language of its own. By the time the sun started to set, the property was transformed. The lawn was shaggy but cut. The porch was clear. You could see the house from the road again. It still looked old and tired, but it no longer looked abandoned. It looked like it was waking up. George packed up his tools as the sky turned orange and purple. "You need anything, you come by the store," he said. "People round here, we look after our own." He got in his truck and rattled away down the drive, leaving me alone on the porch of my house, in the middle of my land. I looked at my hands. They were blistered and dirty, my nails were broken, but they were my hands, and they had worked for my home. I had faced down the ghosts of my past. I had made a choice, and a stranger had shown me kindness. It was more than I'd had in my entire life. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was building. In the days that followed, a new rhythm began to establish itself. My life, which had been a series of passive movements, from one home to another, one school to another, dictated by caseworkers and judges, was now governed by my own choices, my own labor. Each morning I woke with the sun, the light filtering through the dusty bedroom window, and the first thing I felt was not the familiar dread of the group home, but a sense of purpose. The house was my partner in this new dance. It was a massive, overwhelming project, but I broke it down into small, manageable pieces. I started with one room, the kitchen. I scrubbed the floors on my hands and knees until the original wood grain started to show through the layers of grime. I washed every plate and every cup, unwrapping them from their newspaper shrouds like archaeological treasures. I cleaned the windows until the sunlight poured in, bright and unfiltered, making the dust motes dance. It was slow, painstaking work. There were moments of deep frustration. A pipe under the sink burst one afternoon, flooding the floor with rusty water and my own tears of despair. The electricity was fickle, flickering on and off with the whims of the ancient wiring. But every small victory, a window that opened smoothly, a cabinet door that no longer squeaked, the simple act of making a cup of tea in a clean mug, felt like a monumental achievement. Mr. Henderson proved to be a true ally. He guided me through the process of setting up a bank account and making the first critical payment on the back taxes. The woman at the county clerk's office looked at me with a mixture of pity and suspicion when I came in. But when she saw the cashier's check, her demeanor changed. It was a stay of execution. It bought me time. Mr. Henderson also began his investigation. "George Gable's memories are a good starting point," he told me over the phone one evening. "He remembers the men who used to come around, harassing your grandmother. He remembers the talk in town after your father died, the whispers that it wasn't an accident. No one ever talked to the police. They were too scared, but people remember. The letters, he explained, were my grandmother's chronicle. While they might not be admissible in a traditional court of law as standalone evidence, they created a powerful narrative, a timeline of intimidation and pressure that corroborated the memories of people like George. Northgate Holdings was a legitimate company now, but its roots, he suspected, were rotten. He was looking for a pattern, for other families who had been pressured into selling their land for far less than it was worth. "This is bigger than just your 5 acres, Ilara," he said. "This is about a whole community." His words stayed with me. I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I was standing on the foundation of my grandmother's 30-year vigil. I was fighting for her, for my father, and for all the other people whose stories had been buried. My world, which had always been so small, confined to the 4 walls of whatever room I'd been assigned, was expanding. I started walking into town once a week to buy groceries at Gable's General Store. At first, the locals just stared. I was an outsider, a ghost from the town's past. But George had put the word out. He'd told them I was Evelyn's granddaughter, and that I was staying. Slowly, people started to nod when I passed. The woman at the post office offered me a small, hesitant smile. A farmer driving his tractor down the road gave me a wave. These were small gestures, tiny seeds of connection. But to me, they felt like a lifeline. I was becoming part of the landscape, no longer just a visitor. One evening, sitting on the newly swept porch, I watched the fireflies begin to dot the twilight. I held the photograph I'd found, the one of my mother holding me. I had a family. They weren't here, but they were not gone. They were in the wood of the house, the soil of the land, the stories in the letters. And my grandmother, Evelyn, I felt her everywhere. She was in the scent of lavender that still clung to the linens in her closet. She was in the solid feel of the tools in the barn. She was in the stubborn resilience of the old farmhouse that refused to fall down. This inheritance wasn't the land or the house. It was the choice. The choice to turn a place of pain and loss into a place of healing and growth. The choice to stand your ground. The choice to build a home, not with wood and nails, but with courage and memory. The work was far from over. It was just beginning. The house needed a new roof. The plumbing was a disaster. The fields needed to be plowed and planted. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of the future. I had a past to stand on, and a piece of the world to call my own. And that's my story, or at least the beginning of it. I wanted to share it with you because I know what it feels like to be defined by a file in a cabinet, to be told a story about yourself that doesn't feel true. My journey taught me that home isn't something you're given, it's something you build. It's something you fight for. It's found in the truth, no matter how painful that truth is. It's in the quiet courage of those who came before us, and in the kindness of strangers who see you not for where you've been, but for where you're determined to go. For me, it was a locked barn and a chest full of letters. For you, it might be something else. A difficult conversation you need to have, a move to a new city, a decision to leave a situation that's holding you back. The details are different, but the heart of it is the same. Reclaiming your own story. If this story resonated with you, if it stirred something in your own heart, I want to invite you to be part of this. Hear from you. Have you ever had to fight for your home, whether it was a physical place or a sense of belonging? What does your stories matter? They are a reminder that none of us are alone in our struggles or our victories. Thank you for listening. And remember, be brave enough to turn the key.